Hi and welcome back. So in this video we're just going to be creating the new project for our app and talking a bit about what is JSON. So the first thing to do is go ahead and create another project here under the full stack folder, and I'm going to call it price of chair, and I'm going to stick to using the same virtual environment simply because we didn't really use it in the last video in creating the last project. So I'm going to reuse it for now because the other project really isn't much of a project, so we can reuse it for this one and create another one when we do need it afterwards. So then normally when you'd create a project you would have the name of the project here at the topmost folder, and then you would create a Python package and call it src for source code. So your project would not be called src originally. That was only for sake of example and speed that we did that in the previous project we created. But in here we're going to create the source folder, and then notice how it creates an init.py file immediately inside it. That is Python's way of knowing that this src folder will contain Python files. It's nothing scary. Okay, so now we've got our project, which is also using the virtual environments that we used before. I'm going to create another file in here, and I'm going to call this file data.json. And notice how the wee icon here at the side of the file has JSON written on it. This is because JSON is a type of data. More specifically, it's a type of data that has two large data structures available to it and a bunch of data types as well. So what do I mean with this? All JSON files are structured starting with an opening and closing brace. And this is essentially like a table in a database, or rather like a row even. The first thing you have is a name, for example, students. And then this student has a value associated with it. So you can think of students as the key, or the name of the row in the table, the name of the column rather. So students would be the key, and then it would have a value associated with it. The most logical value to be associated with a students element is a collection of students, a list of students really. And indeed JSON has something like that. So you can create lists in JSON by using square brackets, unlike the curly braces used originally. And then inside the square brackets we can put the data that we want to store. For example, we've got 3 students in our students list. Okay, so that's fair enough. That kind of makes sense, yeah? But it seems a bit limited that we can only store a list of students and give that name. It probably does mean that we can look for the students element and then get a list of them, which from a programming sense is interesting. But we can do more. We can in fact use curly braces here and then say things like name. Jose, Mark, 100. ID, something like that. And then we can do the same for the other students as well. Notice how there's commas here and here, but not at the very end. So we could have something like that. And indeed we could have another list inside a student and then another dictionary inside it, and so on and so on. So by now you've probably gathered that these things in curly braces are called dictionaries or objects, and that these things in square brackets are called lists. So a dictionary is simply a key value pair set. So we can have one key and one value, or we can have more keys and more values. But one key can only have one value associated with it. So we could not have name here twice. That would be wrong. So we can't really do that. But this is the power of JSON. It is used to structure and send information in a way that is easily readable and easily followed, both by humans and by the computer as well. It's really very easy to interact with. And also, as well as JSON, we've got something called XML. So I'm going to create something called a file called data.xml, and XML is similar in a sense that we can have also enclosing the students. We can have these two tags, this opening tag and this closing tag with the backward slash or forward slash, and then we can have something like name, or rather Jose, and then the mark 100 and things like that. So I'm not really a see, this would be a big error. This would be an interesting problem here, where the name of the student is Mark, and then he's got a mark associated with it. So XML also has some problems, just like any other type of data. And I will not be covering XML. I have never used XML before. I will not be covering it at all. This is just to give you a sense of what it is and how you write it, so you can kind of recognize it when you do see it. And XML, just like HTML, works by having these tags enclosing the content that the tag refers to. So the students here would have these two tags inside it, and each one of them would have something in them as well. However, as I said, we're not going to be looking at XML at all throughout the course. It's not really that used nowadays, especially not with Python. So we're going to be focusing on JSON, which is very versatile, a very lightweight way of doing things. So this was JSON and a quick overview of what XML looks like, but really nothing in depth. Probably something that's completely wrong as well by XML standards, but just to let you know what it looks like. And now what we're going to be looking at in the very next few videos is how to interact with the web, how to make web requests, and how to parse websites, and how to get data out of them. So I'm excited about them, so I'll see you in the very next video. Hi and welcome back. So in this video we're going to be looking at how we can make a GET request, and this GET request is used to access a web page and to get the web page back and be able to load it and look at the web page. So the first thing to do is to create the file, the Python file that is going to run our application. So I'm just going to go into new Python file and create my app.py file. Remember, you can call this whatever you want. I am simply choosing to call it app. That is a fairly standard name for the main sort of file in Python. Now if we want to make a GET request, if we want to be able to request the page from the server that it is on, if we want to request a page from wherever it is that it's stored on the internet, we're going to need a library called requests. And this requests library makes it extremely easy for us to make these GET requests. So there are two ways to install the library. The first way is quite simple. Simply go to your preferences and then click on Project Interpreter under your project. Press the plus sign. Well, first of all, select the appropriate virtual environment if it is not already selected. In my case, it is. Then press the plus sign and find the requests library that you want to install. And then it's here, version 2.7.0. And then finally just press install. So that is one option that we can do. But the other option is to put this in a file that Python already knows should contain the libraries that we want to install. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my project and press new file and type requirements.txt. This is the standard name for this specific file. And in this requirements.txt file we should write all of the libraries, all of the packages, all of the code external to our application that we want to use. So simply requests equal 2.7.0. This is the name of the library and this is the version. And equal simply says I want this version of this library. In fact, I want exactly this version of this library. Okay, and then when we go back to our Python file, PyCharm will already tell us that this package is not installed and that we should install it if we want to use it. So we can simply press on install. And after a wee moment, the package gets installed. And now we can go into our app.py and say import requests, and sometimes PyCharm does take a while to be able to do this. It is sometimes quite slow, so I'm simply going to run that and then it works. Okay, so after a couple of seconds that now gets recognized again. You may have to run the app before it gets recognized. This is a small bug in PyCharm, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. And now we can do our request. So I'm going to create a variable called request that is going to hold this request that I'm doing. So request equal requests dot get and then http www.google.com. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to perform this request. We're going to get this page, and then we're going to put the page as well as a number of other pieces of information inside this request variable. Such pieces of information may be things like, has the page loaded correctly? There's quite a lot of information that comes when doing a GET request, and that gets put in the request variable, but the thing we're interested in the most is request.content. And this content is simply the full code of the page that we requested. So this is going to return the HTML code of google.com. Okay, so let's press run and see what happens. And indeed here you can see that we get a long line of code, which is google.com's code. Okay, so this is how you can make a GET request, and in the next few videos we're going to be exploring this a bit more and essentially starting to parse the data from some of these pages. So hopefully you find that as exciting as I do, and I'll see you in the next video. Hi and welcome back. So in this video we're going to pretend that you want to buy this chair, and this is in fact going to be a big part of the app we're going to be building in this section. It's going to be a very simple app that is simply going to get the price of the chair and then be able to tell you whether you should buy it or not depending on the price of it. So this part of telling you whether to buy or not depending on the price is something we looked at in the last section. So really the only difference now is that instead of depending on the user to tell us something, we're going to get it from the internet. Now, we've just made a request to google.com and we've been able to get the entire code of the page. So now surely we can do the same with this page. And indeed, if you right click on the page and go to inspect element, you'll be able to get the entire code of the page shown here. And when we make a GET request, this is what we're going to be getting back. So now select the price of the chair, or indeed any other item that you're interested in getting. You don't have to get this chair, by the way. You can find something that you're more interested in. And then go to inspect element, and then it'll show you here this one element that is indeed what holds the price of the chair. Here you can see the £115. So now we know that this span item prop equals price, class equals now price is what we're interested in. If you remember from when we very quickly looked at XML, remember this is called a tag, this span, and these things are called attributes. And now we may or may not have looked at those, but these are also key value pairs. So item prop is the key or the name of the attribute, and the price is the value of the attribute. So this is a span tag with two attributes, item prop and class. And then item prop has the value price and class has the value now price. This is enough so that we can search for this specific tag and find out the price after we make our GET request. The first thing to do, however, is to make sure that we remember what this is so that we can look for it later on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a Python comment here with span item prop equals price, class equals now price. Like so. So now I remember this is what we're looking for, and we can close the page and focus on writing the code. So that's what we're going to be doing in the very next video. But first, let's get the link and put it here instead. And I don't think we need that. We don't need this either. So this is now the link. This is what we're looking for. Let's have a look in the next video at how we can exactly find that. So I'll see you in the next one. Hi and welcome back. So in this video we're going to look at how we can find the price in the code of this page that we are going to be requesting. So now we're not looking any longer at the browser, but instead we're simply going to get the HTML code of this page and then search through it until we find the price. The great thing about that is that then we could do the same with any other item on this page, which means we could start potentially building some sort of application that would let us find prices of items and possibly even alert us when they go down in price, which would be quite interesting. We're not going to be building the full-blown application at this stage, but we will get back to that later on in the course. In order to be able to search through this HTML code and find the data that we're looking for, we're going to be using another library. This library is called Beautiful Soup, and it's actually a very, very popular library for doing exactly this. So if we go to our requirements.txt and we type the name of the library and the version, which we can find by going into the preferences, project interpreter, press plus, type Beautiful Soup 4, Beautiful Soup 4, and the version is 4.4.0. So that's your library name, that's the version, so we can close that, type Beautiful Soup 4 equals 4.4.0, and then go back to your app, install the requirement as you know, and then it gets installed, and we can import it from BS4 import Beautiful Soup. And once again, PyCharm is doing its thing where it doesn't want to run it, and there we go. So as I said, this is a small bug with PyCharm. Sometimes it takes a wee while, or sometimes you need to run the app or press install or play around with it until it works. But this is what you want to be doing here. And notice that we're no longer using the library name or the package name in here, or in fact here either. So what's this? Basically, this Beautiful Soup 4 package contains a folder or a file called BS4, and this BS4 file is the one that contains this class or this thing that we want to import. So this is why we're doing it this way. But I would not worry too much about that. Simply know that from the BS4 file we want to import this thing, and this is what we're going to be using. So now we've got this request, we can get the content of the page by doing request.content. So I'm going to create a variable with the content of the HTML code of this page. Then we're going to create a soup variable, and this soup variable is going to contain a way of searching through this data using Beautiful Soup. So we're going to do Beautiful Soup content, and we also have to tell it html.parser. And what this does is it says, okay, we're going to be using Beautiful Soup with this content that we've got, and we're telling it this is a HTML content, so we want to use the HTML parser that's built into Beautiful Soup to search through this data. Then we'll find the element that we're looking for, which is this one, and we can do that by saying soup.find, and then the name we're looking for is the span tag, and then it has a bunch of attributes that we are going to use. Notice how the IntelliSense, this is what this is called, already tells us what we should be writing. So there's a name, there's some attributes, ATTRS, whether we want to search recursively or not, this is true by default, and some text and some more optional arguments. I wouldn't worry too much about the text or the optional arguments. The recursive one is more interesting because that means it will not only stay on the topmost level of the HTML, on the topmost tag, but instead it will drill down and go to all the tags and all the children tags. Not too interesting for you now, maybe, but nevertheless I would not modify it and leave it as the default value, which is true. And then here we go with the attributes, and this is a dictionary like the JSON dictionary that we've seen before. So item prop is price and comma, class is now price. Okay, so now when we execute this, we should be finding this element here. And finally we can print the element.text, and this will be this text content here. I'm going to delete that. So let's run it and see what happens. Well, we've got £115, but it is on a bit of a strange location. Notice how there is a bunch of text, a bunch of white space before the numbers, and also some white space after the numbers. So we can remove this leading and trailing white space with the strip method. So this element.text is a string, and all strings have this strip method that you can call on them. This is what the dot means. That will remove all leading and trailing white space. So let's call that again. And now indeed we get the £115 here. However, this £115 is not a number. This is indeed a string, because it has this pound symbol in front of it. So what can we do to remove the pound symbol and to indeed convert this into a number? Well, this is what we're going to be looking at in a very next video, how to remove the pound symbol and convert the remaining numbers into an actual number that Python can understand and add and subtract and things like that. So I'll see you in the next video. Hi and welcome back. So in this video we're going to be looking at converting that pound 115.00 string into a number that we can compare and see if it's a low price or a high price. The first thing to do, however, is to make sure that instead of printing the text contents, that we are assigning them to a variable. So I'm going to create a variable called string price that is going to be the essentially £115.00. This is what this string price contains. And now we want to remove the pound sign. So we want to essentially get that without the pound sign. And we can do something that's called slicing. And slicing is used to get essentially a slice of a string. So what I'm going to create here is price without symbol. And this variable is going to be the string price with this opening square bracket, colon, closing square bracket at the end. And what this would do is it would give this variable exactly the same contents as this variable up here. So right now, this would also be 115.00, which obviously is not what we want. So what does this mean? What is this doing? And why not just leave it as that, right? Well, what this is doing is it's copying. It's getting everything from the start of this string to the end of this string, and it's putting everything inside this other string. Why not just do this? And the answer to that is, if we just do that, what we're doing is saying this string now is exactly equal to this one, which means that Python does some optimization in terms of memory and things like that. Nothing that we're going to get into. So if you want to copy a string and have an exactly new string, then I would recommend that you would stick to this just for the time being, and we will get into exactly what that means in a later section. But we won't be doing this in this section. We are using this for a reason, which is that we want to get all of the string except for the very first item. Remember that counting starts at index 0 in programming, so therefore this is in fact going from 0 to the end, which means it's getting index 0, index 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So what we want to do is, instead of start at 0, we want to start at 1. And then we'll start at this index here and go to the very end. And that's what we'll do indeed. So now if we print the price without symbol and we run this app, we will get in fact only 115.00. However, this is still not a number. This is still a string, so we have to convert it into a number. If we do int, then we will get an error, because this has 0.00 at the end. So what we want to do instead of int is float. And a float is simply another type of data that is a number with a floating point element to it. So this is a floating point number, which is why it's called a float. And now when we do that and we run this again, we will get 115.0. The second 0 gets dropped because it doesn't really add any more accuracy to the number. And now we can compare this and see if it is greater than 500 or less than, or whatever it is that our budget is. So for example, say if we can spend £200, we can print whether the price without the symbol converted into a float is less than £200 or not. So we'll press run again. We'll get the word true coming out, which is excellent. Before continuing, let's create another variable that will be the price, now as a float, and then we can make some sort of if statement. If the price is less than a certain number, which is your budget, print that you should buy the chair. If it is not, say that you shouldn't buy it. I'll let you do that, so pause the video and attempt to do this by yourselves. Once you have, press resume and we'll go through it ourselves. Okay, so hopefully you've managed. If price is less than 200, we'll print buy the chair. And if it is not, print do not buy, it's too expensive. Okay, so that's great. If we run this, it should tell us to buy the chair. And indeed it does. We can print something else as well. The current price is format price. Like that. And we can press play, and it tells us the current price is 115.0. Now, instead of using the price float, we can just use string price from above, which will give us indeed the formatted price, which may be better for this purpose. Okay, so this is how you would do this if-else statement here, and this is how you would parse the HTML content of a page to find something that you're interested in, and also how you would do requests. So this is our simple app to get the price of the chair, and in the very next section things are going to start to get interesting as we dive into object-oriented programming and doing things like that with Python. That is going to greatly increase the sort of complexity we can put into our applications, and therefore how amazing our applications are going to be. So I'll be seeing you in the next video.